guys have, so the corporate piece, you guys have nailed that in terms of delivery, right?
Yep. I think, as I said, the coaching individuals, which is really leadership development, how to help develop a leader. And so one-on-one coaching of leaders has been a big part of it. And out of that, almost all the coaching that you give to leaders is really about making them a better leader or manager. We have yet to really spend a lot of time developing formal tools around teams. We have the motivational matrix that we've set up, and we've used it to see how teams come together, or like blind spots in teams, or when teams have too much of the same motivation, or areas where there's missing motivation.
So you're talking, when you say teams,
yeah,
are you talking high rank, CFO, CEO, all of the interconnectedness there, or is that moved down?
Yeah, no, I think it. Typically, we've worked in the upper leadership, so you're working in the C-suite, but the team stuff that we've made because of MCore and its scalability and affordability and how little time it takes to actually get the data through technology and automation. I think because of that, now you can go down to the lowest level teams. You can go into supervisors, helping people supervise. A lot of engineering in companies, we have been able to, you'll get project leads or project managers, and this can help them and help them understand their team.
So who would make up a team of, like, engineer? Let's take engineer. What would the team be comprised of?
Well, an engineering team could be a group of designers where they design products. Others who would be in the lab doing scientific development, testing of the products. I think also teams of engineers where they're doing product maintenance, or updating products, or refining those products. So those aren't typically design engineers, but they're functional engineers. They're going to make it better, make things smoother, make them cheaper.
So why is this so important? I mean, what you'd think people could come together and just kind of work things out, work their differences out, and be effective. Apparently that's not the case.
Well,
why is that?
Yeah, so I think teams do work things out, but it's how long does it take to work it out? How much friction is there? What are some of the outcomes, negative outcomes of teams having to work things through? I think once you understand the motivation of the people in the team, it goes right to understanding. Now I understand why he does what he does, and why he says and does what he does, and what his motivation is. Once they understand, you can start aligning people's expectations and then aligning their work.
Yeah, that's a huge part, is getting people to validate other people that what they're doing is actually.
Now I get it. Now I understand it. Now I was working with two leaders. Again, we're not talking down into the lab or functional work groups. A lot of times in corporations, they call them work groups, where it's a group of people working together with a common purpose, but they have different roles that they're playing. Or some have similar roles, but they're splitting up some of the work. You write this part of the code, I'll write that part of the code. You test the code. You're in charge of getting the code to be more efficient and to reduce, the code to functionality. So we went from 100 20,000 lines of code to 90 and it does the same thing. So it's more efficient, more effective, less buggy. But it's how people, what they're doing, how they're working together.
Do you think there's is there a lot of ignorance? I mean, in your experience with corporate and so forth, is there a lot of ignorance towards, appreciating the differences? And, I mean, do you get a lot of people that are just kind of wanting to fly solo or just not really wanting to, the Bible talks about as iron sharpens iron, right? Where you get more of this fit, knocking off these rough edges so that you can, use the synergy and all that stuff. I mean, is there a lot of ignorance to the importance of this stuff, do you think? Or?
Yeah, I think if you look overall, I think corporations do teams better than any other sector. So they, nonprofits, churches, government, so I think corporations do more work in teams than anybody. I think people generally have an appreciation for what people bring to teams. Hey, this guy is an expert in quality, or this guy has some expertise in part of the technology, the software.
Okay.
But so I know that people usually appreciate the unique contribution that someone can make.
It's just the skill maybe of putting all that together.
But it's actually working with them to get things done. And understanding how they're motivated to do what they do and how that impacts the group. And once you understand that, you not only gain a better appreciation for that, but then you know how to navigate or manage things, or to see the positive and the negative impact that someone might be having because of what their motivations are. And then when you see the positive, that's easy, everyone's excited. But when you see sometimes the shadowy, the flat, or the negative that comes out of someone's motivation, then you have words for it and understanding, and you can have discussion about it, you can work things out, but you now see the root or the source of it, and you have a way to have a dialogue and resolution.
Interesting. With teachers, because we're so autonomous and there's just not much skill in working together from what I've discovered. There is to a certain degree, but we can always retreat to our classrooms and and we have our own little island that we can run there.
Well, teachers, I think that's right. I think teachers go into teaching because they run their own little business. They have control of their own little domain, and they own their class, they own their area. I'm the history teacher, or I'm the social studies guy, or I'm the psych guy, or I'm the math algebra guy. And when you only have one teacher teaching algebra, they just sort of run the algebra, all the department. They pick the textbooks, they set the curriculum, they're in charge of everything. But now when you have a bigger school and you have 5 teachers teaching algebra, they have to agree to standards, the text, the curriculum, the outcomes, the schedule, the philosophy of teaching, the pace of teaching. They've got to agree to standardized testing across the group, so that one kid isn't in one class and basically getting a B, and if he was working with another teacher, he'd have an A+, because that teacher is teaching to a different level or a different standard. But by and large, teachers have a lot of motivation, which is sort of like an entrepreneur. I'm going to run my own thing, do my own thing, set my own agenda, and it's not a team teaching deal. It's not a teamwork. When they write lesson plans, they do them on their own. There's nobody there to tell them it's a good one or bad one.
Yep, they run through all their own filters. And,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And you know, and the truth is administration, as long as they're hitting certain levels of standards, they let them do their job.
Yeah. So I just, I've seen so many different groups, whether that be 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, whatever, get to a point of just gridlock. And, you've seen the situation where 2 people, I just don't know what to do in this. I just don't know how to handle it. I have no clue on how to go forward from here,
Yeah.
Lack of skill. So, okay, so
at the root, I mean, there are some people that are just obstinate, don't want to work with others. They've got identity issues or other things that are driving. But many times, I would say the majority of times, it's usually motivation that they have that gets negative, and they're switching over to the negative polarity of their motivation for some reason or another. And it could be self-esteem,
pride,
lack of understanding of relationships.
Yeah.
We've talked about EQ, social and emotional health. And if they don't have strong EQ, the people with variation or lower EQ tend to move into the negative or shadowy aspects of their motivation more easily than those who have high EQ.
So how does EQ differ from MCORE? It's just a different piece, right?
Yeah, EQ is just...
It's broader.
Yeah, I mean, it's really measuring something different. EQ is social functioning and emotional functioning.
Okay.
How do I handle relationships, and what have I learned about relationships? Now, you could say that has something to do with collaboration, and it does. Because people who collaborate at a high level and effectively usually understand people well, and they understand relationships well. And so they might have high relational EQ. So they'll collaborate and work with others more efficiently, effectively. So there's ways that EQ can inform and cross over into the idea of motivation. But EQ is much more, because it starts with your own understanding of your own identity, how to express your identity to others through feelings and relationship and interaction. And then it's having healthy dialogue, but then more than that, it also goes into decision making. How do I make decisions, especially under stress, that involve other people, and then also a factor around stress. How do I flexibility, adaptability, things like that.
Where did the EQ come from? I mean, that's not you guys. That was
no, EQ comes from a guy named Daniel Goleman, Goleman, and back in the late 50s and 60s, he was starting to see that certain people had higher relational, social functioning, and some had stronger emotional capabilities, emotional functioning capabilities. And those usually are a product not of giftedness or design, but they're more a product of how they were raised, their self-esteem, self-identity,
so
their
it's a skill.
family of origin. Yep,
More
it's more of a skill. It's more of a skill. There is some motivation, though. Some of our motivators, motivational themes, would suggest that certain people will have higher IQ because of their motivation to do work with others. So in that one, we talked about the whole idea of collaborate versus be key. Be key people will think less about working with others socially and emotionally, and they just want to do their job. So they'll tend to be independent. They'll tend to work in isolation better. They'll work better when they can control the full outcome of the product, and less motivated when others are involved in their work, deeply involved.
So in a little synopsis, what was the beginnings of MCORE? Where did it come from? I mean, I read, the book and how would you explain it?
Well, it's kind of a journey for me too, because when I first joined SEMA, they had the full motivational suite, if you will, or profile, which looked at 5 different areas of motivation. And those are good, but it's just like anything, it gets more and more complicated the more data, the more experience you have, the more people you're working with. And so they began to look at motivation in these 5 spectrums. When SEMA first started back in the 50s, 60s, because it's now about 55 years that SEMA International, as it's known today, began to put together this unique system to identify people's motivations. But it started early with basic motivational themes. And
so were they just the broad themes? Did he identify 27, or back then were there few? Or did he just have the 5?
Nope, he started with just looking at motivational themes. And so today we use 27 in the MCORE version of it. But what they basically did is saw in population the way people were motivated themselves. We're just studying the person themselves and how they were motivated, their drive or to do things and get things done. And then later they started saying, well, how are people motivated now that they're working with others? So when people are working with others, how are they motivated? And they came up with what they call roles, motivational roles, and the way people relate to others motivationally. So that became like a second dimension of motivation. And then a third dimension of motivation came out of strengths, kind of like strength finders today. And they started at the building blocks. They saw that people were motivated to do things like learn, oversee, plan, produce. And so those are sort of lower level tools or strengths. But those motivations came through. So those are called motivated abilities. A little more like skills or strengths that are innate in you, but they're kind of in your toolbox, but they don't often tell you what direction. Motivational themes will tell you what you're motivated to do: build, develop, participate, collaborate, impact. So the motivational relationship is, what role will you play in that? I'll start things up as a prime mover. I'll work synergistically with others. I'll be a moving force, building energy and getting people involved. There are just different ways that people are motivated to work with others. So, and then the final 2 were the circumstances that trigger people's motivations, which is almost always used just in coaching. What circumstances need to be present for someone to get motivated to use their motivational themes, their motivated abilities, to work with others in a certain way. And then the final one is stuff. We call it stuff or subject matter. When they can work with this kind of subject matter, they're highly motivated to work with ideas, to work with their hands, to work with tools, to work. But it's the stuff people use when they're motivated. None of the only things that are deeply insightful that we discussed was to look at motivational themes. So we took the 5 dimensions, pulled them back apart, and decided to create science just around one of those 5 dimensions. And that's the motivational themes MCORE. Later, we will actually do role and relationship and understand how people are motivated to work with others.
Okay, so rewind again. You said there was 3.
5 motivational segments or motivational.
And MCOR is
Just one.
which one?
It's motivational themes.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yep, it's called motivational themes, and it's the one they began with. But then they just made it more complicated over the years. And then today, the result is an executive motivation tool called a MAP, Motivated Abilities Pattern, but that requires, $2,000 worth of cost and involves probably 8 to 10 hours for the individual to go through the assessment, and probably about the same amount of time for an expert to write the motivational pattern.
So the motivational pattern, does that come out of the MCOR? Or are there other tools that you use as well?
The motivational pattern includes the MCOR as one aspect of it.
Okay.
Now, they don't get at the MCOR, they don't get at it through what we do through technology. They get it by having people write stories and look at what 27 are in those stories.
Mm-hmm.
But they do that as an expert that's trained in it, basically says, I keep hearing impact, I keep hearing collaborate, I keep hearing in all the stories a pattern around planning, building and developing. And so they kind of look for the top 3, 4, or 5 things, and they just pull them out of many stories, usually 8 to 10, where we just look at 3 stories and isolate the motivational themes. We don't ask any questions about anything else in the story other than what motivational themes are there.
Let you take a couple puffs. Is your stogie going on?
No, it's excellent. I'm working it.
Okay, so what is the big difference between MCOR and, let's say, StrengthsFinder? What sets MCOR so apart that it needs to be its own thing, used in conjunction with?
Well, I'll give you, it's a great question, because what we're talking about are concepts here, so they're easy to see, sometimes to measure, but they're conceptual. Gallup was well aware when they built strength finders of the concept of motivation, or the construct of motivation. In talking to some of the people who were at Gallup when they were building and developing strength finders, which is a wonderful tool and in the end has raised a ton of awareness around, inwardly how people behave,
So it's really helped to validate this whole thing.
Yeah.
Innate.
Yep. A matter of fact, one of the 5 areas of the map that I talked about is strengths. They just call them something called motivated abilities. And we don't have 35 of them. I can't remember. Gallup has 37 strengths. I can't remember. But everyone's given their top 5. And so we can derive people's strengths from their story. And so you could literally look at the 8 to 10 stories someone would do if they were doing a map, and we can pull out their inherent strengths. And the strengths are in their toolbox. They're things like belief, persuade, they call it woo, right?
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, those are more around tools you have, but they don't tell you what you would do with them. I have the ability to persuade, but I do it in order to build or develop or impact or explore. So I always say that motivation's in the middle. It gives direction to what they'll use their tools for. I'll use these tools when I think about a toolbox and what's in there, a wrench, a saw. I mean, when you look at a toolbox, especially a big one, you say, well, these are the tools a person has, but they could do a lot with it. They could design new engines. They could fix engines. They could repair engines. They could modify and develop new engines from what's existing. They could create engines that excel or perform at a higher level. But those tools can be used motivationally for a lot of different reasons. And so motivational themes give direction to those tools or help describe the why. Why would someone use that tool? And it's to build, to develop, to find potential, to collaborate with others. So the one dimension that SEMA has is pretty sophisticated around strengths. And we have 12 instead of 30 some, but in the end, those 12 motivated abilities, we don't just say you learn, you're a learner, because that's one of them, but we'll say why you learn. And so we describe them with modifiers. You learn to, you like to learn in order to problem solve, or you like to learn in order to teach others. You want to learn in order to gain knowledge. You want to learn to solve problems. You want to learn in order to bring understanding.
So what are the 12?
I don't know if I'll be able to remember them off the top of my head.
What are they categorically compared to the 27?
They're different. They're different because they're not motivational themes, but they're just strengths that people have. They're the same concept around Gallup's strengths, but Gallup popularized their strengths earlier and arranged them differently than SEMA.
Yeah, I never saw the 12 thing. That'd be interesting.
Well, it's like 12.
Send an email on
I think there might be 14 of them now that I think about it.
Okay.
But that underneath each of those, there are different ways people will use those tools.
So those strengths, they're not necessarily innate. They could be learned. They could be skilled.
Well, it's a good question. I think strengths, some are inherent within a person, some are learned and refined, but they tend to be enduring, and they tend to be, once a person is older, pretty stable, their core strengths. They've either learned them, developed them, become proficient with them, but they are different than motivations. So
Gallup, their strengths finder. So those 33 or whatever it was, I can't remember either.
I think we're like 37.
Yeah. Those aren't necessarily. Here, I'll wait till you come off of it. How's your smoke?
Good. That time you got me talking.
That's it?
Okay, keep going.
So StrengthsFinder, their strengths are not necessarily innate. Some might be, some might not.
Yeah, they would say most of them are, or that they're at least stable in adults. They're pretty stable or enduring.
Yeah.
But they would also say that your top 5 can change.
Okay.
Where SEMA would say that the way we describe people's strengths, they're more stable and enduring. And they might even be a little more in a person's DNA.
Okay. But then you pare it down even more into the CMs, and now you're talking, this is DNA stuff.
It's the what?
So when you get down into the CMs, though, now you're talking more DNA stuff.
Yep. CMs are really stable, and we see them at the earliest stories in people's lives, and we find them present throughout their whole life.
Okay, so I see what you mean by the why piece. So the CMs give more reason, give more why to the strengths that they have.
Yeah, it's kind of like this. Here are my strengths. I got a whole shelf, 2 shelves full of tools. These are the tools I have. And here's the ones I love to use. I'm really good with a hammer. I'm really good with a chisel. But here are 37 tools, but there's some that I use more often than others. And I'm better with those tools.
Yeah.
But what am I going to do with those tools? They're on my shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And I may have
Okay.
refined my use of those tools, used them more. I might have some favorite tools that I go to all the time. Others that I use very seldom.
Sure. So it's pretty simple. You're what you're motivated to use in terms of tools.
Yeah, I'm going to use those tools to build something, fix something here. I'm going to use some of those tools to get that engine over there running better,
Sure.
faster.
So your CMs isn't a replacement for, a strengths finder thing.
Oh no,
Yeah.
it's
Okay,
matter
so
of fact,
very
we've
positive.
created, instead of building a tool like strength finders around our own inherent strengths,
Yeah.
we decided to just talk about how endowed strengths and endowed motivations work together. And we've trained probably more people from Gallup than any other organization in executive coaching to use
really?
motivation. Yeah.
Sure, because they already have that piece refined, so
Yeah.
they see the benefit of.
Yeah, taking it to the next level.
Yes.
What are you going to do with your strengths? And the pattern people have is to use those top 3, 4, or 5 motivations to use their strengths. I'm going to use my tools to do these things. And it could be any one of those 27 things.
So Arthur Miller discovered something. I mean, he really did. Or at least put flesh to a discovery that we're not a clean slate. Would you agree to that?
Oh yeah, his books and his experience and the science and that he offers is that motivations are inherent in a person, and that they're not a product of environment or learning or circumstances, but that a poor kid in Africa will have a certain set of strengths that will show up in a certain way, and a wealthy kid in America might have those same top 3, but they're still building things, they're still developing things, they're still planning and producing things, they're still bringing control over things or making them excellent. So it's not about money or opportunity, it's about they're going to find a way to use their motivations. And if they're doing what they do best and love what they do, it'll mean that they're using their motivations in their work or in their world. Some people who can't get a job that is an expression of their core motivations because all they can do is work in a factory, they'll tend to, in their own personal time or hobby or unstructured time,
It'll manifest.
use those motivations.
Yeah.
Yep. So in some ways there is circumstance and opportunity, but you'll see in a healthy individual the drive to use those motivations. They'll organize their world, their family, their hobbies, their leisure, their volunteer, their community, in a way that's around their motivations, bringing people together in their neighborhood. Even though they can't do it in their job, they'll try to bring people together. And they'll work on common purposes. They'll want to do something in the neighborhood to fix a park, and they'll gather and labor with other people, even though their job at work doesn't involve that opportunity or possibility.
So you said healthy. That's like a key word here, I think. How would you describe somebody that's healthy in terms of motivation?
Well,
I know there's no perfect, but I mean,
yeah, I think it's a person who knows their strengths, their motivations, and they understand what their top ones are, their middle ones are, and their bottom ones are. I'm not motivated to do this, and I'm okay with that. So one of it is just self-understanding and self-acceptance. I'm not motivated to do something else, but people who are get further ahead in life, or they get more recognition for something. So one is just understanding how you're built, motivated. The other one is accepting that. And then the third one is trying to align your work and your world around those motivations. And the more people can align their work and their world to use those motivations, the healthier they are.
Interesting. So knowing it, accepting it, and then applying
it. Living it out.
Yeah.
Yep. And if things prevent that, it's a problem for people. They have less meaning in life, less sense of purpose overall, less sense of an identity, and in the end probably don't do things as well if they're not using their core motivations. If you're using motivations that are not at your core to do your work, you just don't do it as effectively, efficiently, wholeheartedly. So it affects performance of the person. It affects the output that they do, and more than that, it affects their attitude or their joy or satisfaction that would come out of their work. The highest amount of satisfaction and joy is when a person's using their top 3, 4, or 5, 70, 80, 90% in their job. So that's why we, over and over, like to look at what is the job, what motivations are most important and relevant to that job, and then matching people to those jobs that have a high degree of alignment to those motivations, personal alignment to those motivations. And when you align a person's motivations to the ones that are needed in any given job, they do it with exception, joy, and high, strong results.
Motivated. So the vocational piece.
Yep.
Explain that.
Well,
when it dovetails off of what we were just.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It's part of the whole conversation, just a little more focused. I'll give you just some examples. When you look at a pilot that's going to fly an airplane, and you start looking at the motivations that are present in pilots, you see a huge pattern of top motivations. So a pilot would have things like mastery, because it takes a high level of motivation to master all the technical aspects of flight. When they sit in a cockpit, they literally have to have total mastery over every switch, every button, every condition, every dial that talks about the critical factors that keep an airplane in the air, get it up out of the air, get it flying, and then landing. So mastery would be highly associated with people who are pilots and who are good and sustain a long career in being pilot. Also important to their training, because if someone doesn't like to or if they're not motivated toward mastery, they'll not be motivated to do a lot of the training it takes to master. You know, you don't get to be a pilot if you get a 70% on all your tests.
Or a heart surgeon.
Or a heart surgeon, yeah, that's right. So another one would be control, to bring control. Who wouldn't want the pilot to have control over the aircraft, to totally understand all the factors, all the aspects, all the environment? But they have to be in control of that aircraft. And in order to do that, they have to have control over all environment, circumstances, and possibilities. So people who have control in their map at a high level function really well in a role as a pilot.
Okay, so pause, side note.
Yep.
What's the difference between be key and control?
To be key
in regard to piloting.
Yeah. So to be key probably is another higher level one. It wouldn't be in the top 3 because pilots have a lot of, certainly you have a pilot and a co-pilot, right? And
So you have to have some team.
Yep. So there's a little bit of working together, but it's probably accurate to say that they would have key maybe in their top third, maybe in their top 5. To be key means that whatever is being done rests on your shoulders, and that the total output of what you're doing is dependent on you, the outcome or output. And so even a pilot will share the work with a co-pilot. They will share the work with a flight controller. So they're relying on a number of other people for a successful outcome or output. So the more that somebody is totally key to doing something, which requires only their effort, motivation, or work, the higher that be key would be. A couple examples of be key would be senior pastor in a church preaching, a mass, pulpiteer. So because it's not a group effort, it's not a discussion. They don't have a group of people helping write or deliver the sermon. So they tend to be key. If it goes well, it's because of what they've done. And the output or the final result of that story or achievement or behavior is almost 100% dependent on them.
Okay.
Another one might be a place kicker in the NFL. In the end, yes, they need a little blocking. Yes, they need someone to hold the ball.
Pretty independent.
But 90% of them is kicking the ball, their foot on the ball through the upright.
Yeah.
So they're key to that, and they tend to be used just for that purpose.
Yeah.
All your job is to do is kick the ball. You don't have to be a great tackler. You don't have to be a great blocker. You don't have to catch a ball. You don't have to throw a ball. You don't have to, literally, we'll hike it, put it down, and it's mostly you. But the more that something is dependent on just one person, the more it is that a person with key and central will actually be motivated to do that work.
Sure. Okay. So then the motivator.
Goalie would be another one.
Yeah. Yeah. Very independent.
And control. They'll have control over all the circumstances. That 20 by 10, space. They own that.
Yeah.
And their job is to keep everybody away from it, and every ball from being in it.
Yeah.
They want total control over that space, that job, that work.
So if you're explaining motivator to somebody who knows nothing,
yeah,
how would you elevate or speech it?
Yeah, I would say that motivator is trying to tell you the motivations, the core motivations that ultimately have to be present in order for you to do a certain profession, job, or vocation. If you want to be a teacher or a pilot, as we described, we can tell you what motivations through motivator are key to that.
Yeah. Okay.
And we can help map somebody off their motivators to jobs that require high levels of motivation that sync up with those motivators. So it's really about seeing what people's key motivations are, and then offering the possibilities that are a high fit to any given profession, vocation, or work. Some work doesn't require a high level of motivation or motivational fit. We don't have a motivator called redundancy, which would be a factory worker's job. Standing in front of a machine, punching something out.
So that's interesting. Let's go there for a little bit. So I have a friend of mine. He's been working at Colby and Colby for, I don't know, 30 years now. And redundancy is it, for him. But there's satisfaction there. So obviously he's pulling his motivation out of other things that are kind of keeping him going back.
Yep, he might be
being fueled somewhere.
Yeah, so for instance, the more that a job requires core labor, redundant core labor, or unskilled labor, the less that it probably speaks to a person's inherent motivation. If somebody is working in a factory doing something extremely redundant that doesn't require a certain kind of motivation, but it's just a low level of labor or skill, which is not bad. We need people who dig and do all that. But if you're talking about a vocation or a profession,
but why isn't it just killing them to be there? I mean, I see so much,
because they might not know the difference. Or I'll give you some examples, some real life people where I know they say, well, hey, I work 8 hours a day and I get money, and then when I get that money, then I use it to fuel my motivations. I might buy snowmobiles with that money. And the truth is, I don't love my job, but I love what I can do with the money from my job.
Yeah, okay.
So I might love to fish, but I don't have a job, a profession as a tournament bass fisherman, or someone making videos on fishing, or making baits and starting a company. See, those are a higher level of motivation. So now the person who is healthy and they tend to live for what they can do with the money that they make in their labor, and they'll use it to do things that are motivational to them in their free time or leisure. So there's a lot of people who work those kind of jobs, and then the expression is really in their free time to hunt, to fish, to golf, to volunteer, to go home and have a workshop, and just say, now that might require some level of skill, but that's where their motivation is, but they don't find that in their work.
It's interesting. I mean, we're all kind of redundant somewhere. You have to be if you're going to be somewhat balanced as a human being, right? So really, they've just traded it, maybe.
Well, the caste system in India basically says that the majority of people aren't sophisticated enough, motivated enough. There's not enough possibility or opportunity for them, so they just say, if you're born into a certain race or class, you do labor. You're a laborer, or you're a warrior, or now you're a professional, right? You're into their upper caste system, Brahmin and others. And those are the people who truly both get education and are also given some level of opportunity to use their motivations. So there may be some truth to the idea that wealth, opportunity, and circumstance create an environment for you to align your work with your motivation more than people who are born into poverty and without access to education or opportunity.
Yeah, opportunity.
Yeah.
Big opportunity. So you wonder what, so these people that are, in these lower castes, is that what it is?
Mm-hmm. Caste system, untouchables, or
yeah. So you wonder how they're satisfied, or where they're. So somewhere, it has to manifest somewhere their motivations.
Well, if they can manifest their motivations, they can do it in very simple ways in terms of being a parent, being a neighbor, being involved in extended family, being involved in... When I've been to Africa, I see kids with sticks and tape balls using their motivation.
Yeah, okay.
But it's not in a highly sophisticated and opportunistic way.
Yeah.
But they are motivated to do certain things with it. So it doesn't take money, but it does take freedom and opportunity and possibility in some environment to release motivation. The trades are a very strong example of motivation. Maybe even easier to understand than anything. But people who really love woodworking, metalwork, painting, music, art, clear motivation, and the expression to do that kind of stuff. Music, another real clear place where people can make a living at it. They can... It's just not fixing... I mean, people are motivated to fix things. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. But they use their tools to weld, cut, paint, repair things so that they're functional.
So people can find pretty good satisfaction in a low execution of their motivation.
Yeah, I mean, not every motivation a person has to be sophisticated. You know, we've got some motivations that are just plan things, produce things, organize things, coordinate things, fix things, make things better, improve things. And you wouldn't call those high-level leadership, but they're very important motivations, and they're very meaningful in society. Yeah. When we became automated and did things with mass production, it in some ways dehumanized a person's ability to use their core. When we moved from agrarian hunting and trades to mass production of things and factories, we created a labor that force that probably contributed to a low use of motivations. Even a farmer has very clear motivations. And you can pull farming and agrarian work, planning for crops, organizing, systematizing, rotation of crops, the use of crops, what they're going to do with them, how to create a functional system of animals that work in the agrarian system, environment, provide fertilizer. So the motivations of certain farming can be very clear and aren't just about labor. A lot of jobs for farmers years ago were fixing their equipment, making sure it was up and going. Spent, 4 to 6 months a year preparing, fixing, developing, organizing for their work. As part of their work. But you see what I'm talking about, factories. Wherever you created redundancy and mass producing things, now we really didn't need people with certain motivations. We just needed labor or lowest level of skills and training.
Yeah.
And for people in poverty, that's a way out, but it doesn't mean their life was rich and meaningful, and that they were, that they had contributed in a way that that others would see as substantial or impacting. In America, we can talk about the whole world, but in America, because of freedom, access, and opportunity, which is afforded to a lot of people,
it's really produced some fertile soil to.
That's right. I guess that's an excellent way to say it. We have probably the most fertile soil in all of human history for people to identify, understand, and live out their motivations.
Yeah, wow. And so coupling that fertile soil with good seed and awareness of, these innate things that we bring to society that add value.
Yeah, here's who I am. Guess what? In my society, I have 50 different things that could align to that in a meaningful way. In another society, I might have none. I might have no access to that.
Yeah,
learning and doing those things, or very few things. You can either do this or do that, depending on how highly developed that society is, and access to those vocations or professions.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to. I want to talk with Josh too, and get some of his take on
Joshua,
yes.
Yeah.
Joshua.
Do you have your lighter?
I do.
I just need to manage my burn here a little. So it'd be fair to say that even though you have kids in your class who come with better environments, better opportunities, that in America, if you can help some of those kids overcome some of the lack of some of the problems in their life that don't account for them to be highly motivated, because there's sort of the sense of wanting to do something with your life, or not knowing or caring or thinking you matter. Working with Treehouse, we work with tough kids, but when we look at what they're motivated to do, and if we can say to them, hey, you have good motivation that aligns to being a teacher. I know you don't have a lot of money, you don't have a lot of support at home, or people may not think you're smart enough, but the truth is you have the motivation to do that. You just would have to become more disciplined, find resources, or work harder, frankly.
Yeah, Spark Champions, that book that Joshua turned me on to. I was going to contact the author. He died of a heart attack.
Yeah, what's his name? I know it. Started. Yeah, I think it's out of Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can think of it, but Spark is another way that they try to get at motivation. SEMA has created, they're not the only people that talk about motivation, but we have created the most scientific, exhaustive, and disciplined way to understand, describe, and measure motivation than anybody else. Now, our ability to do something with it that's meaningful and scalable has been a problem, because we've only been able to use it in the executive suite with high-level professions.
Yeah, and that's not very scalable.
Nope. And they kind of took pride in that. We work with executives and high-level people, high-level leaders, but because we know that there's opportunity to discover motivation at a lot of different levels in a very highly... We have more professions in America than anywhere in the world, and more opportunities and demands for those professions than anywhere in the world. China needs more, Russia needs more doctors, but it's having the money, the resources, the training, the education. It's a problem. They've got as many people there that are motivated to do that work because the opportunity and the need is there, but having their society organized and resourced around it is the problem.
Let you get a couple puffs in it. Yeah, the whole education thing, it's just, you know, here we are, and like you said, we're in such fertile soil, as I mentioned, and yet how many hours a day does a K-12 kid spend, you know, in the rest of the field? So to speak? You know, they're just in one kind of small area.
That's where Europe and Australia, Germany have done a better job of
vocational alignment.
Yeah, tracking people to a job.
But that's a dirty word here, tracking.
Yep.
In education, because it pushes too much towards the innate, and I just still think a lot of people believe that we're clean slates, and how dare you impose something like that on somebody else?
Well, it's a philosophical discussion, question, and controversy. I think America maybe has more problems with it than the rest of the world.
Oh, I agree. We're so hyper-pluralistic.
But the truth is, Arthur Miller, one of his books, really discusses this. It used to have the old title, Why You Can't Be Anything You Want to Be.
I liked that title. I know it wasn't popular.
And the reason is because you were designed for, in a certain way, a certain motivations is to do something with a certain purpose. And we know kids are not clean slates when it comes to aptitude, intellect, motivation, values, passion, drive, purpose. Some of it's just there, and you can argue all day long about where it came from, but once you can see it, you can go, that kid could do this, or that kid could do this. And so when you see it, it's really there. Basically, if you have the mindset that anybody can do anything, it probably is not helpful and doesn't serve the person well. Because you just say, well, you can do anything with your life. What do you want to be? And the kid is basically saying, well, I can't carry a tune. How can I be a great singer?
Yeah, exactly. It's too paralyzing.
And we know that certain talent that people have afford them opportunities that others don't. You either have the innate ability to do something through talent, and motivation is the same thing. We just say that you have an innate motivation. And once you discover that, if you live into it and align yourself to work and worth that requires that, you will be better, do better, and find more joy and satisfaction in that. I've wanted to be a rock and roll singer, but trust me, I don't have the natural innate abilities. I appreciate music, but I don't have what it takes to pull it off, and no amount of picking on the guitar and lessons is going to make up for the difference.
So where would music fall on motivation?
Well, performing, mastery.
Okay.
Sometimes excel might be there. Sometimes building and developing would be writing music, producing music. There is some reality to the idea that the question of how was Mozart motivated? Well, he wanted to orchestrate, synthesize, arrange. But there's motivation in what he did.
Yeah.
Even though you don't know, there's also this crazy lack of knowledge about how the brain works in order to do all that. But his behavior he wrote all of his music by himself up in a room, key and central. You don't, great producers and composers usually don't do that with others. There are certain people who will, I was just reading or watching some stuff about the Carpenters and what's the guy's name?
The brother?
The brother.
Can't remember.
Yeah.
Aaron and
Richard.
Yeah.
Richard was an expert at arranging music, but he wasn't any good at writing the lyrics. So he was always looking for lyrics, and he would work with people who could write lyrics, or he would find songs that had good lyrics, and he would compose and arrange and produce the music. But so there he would collaborate, but he would have a key and central role, but collaborate with others in order to actually do that work.
Okay, so let's move to the survey that we want to do. We're going to do. How would you pen that opening explanation?
Oh yeah. Warm me up a little here.
So we're going to survey parents, homeschool parents, and who know nothing about this, and we're trying to just see if there's a market there, obviously, and just unpacking this in such a way that doesn't trick them into, but really gives them the key factors of it so that they attach.
I guess I would probably, if I were writing an introduction to a parent, I would probably say something like, over 55 years, our organization has focused very specifically on the aspect of internal or intrinsic motivation. And we have found that every single individual that is healthy, well-adjusted, and has their basic needs met in life has motivations that are clear and easy to understand. Kirkala.
Figured you guys would be smoking.
Yeah, we're smoking and doing our SEMA interview. We have Bugs has set up recorders, microphones, cigars, and scotch in order to facilitate.
It's a perfect combo.
Yeah, about what's gone on for about an hour here plus.
So we'll be done by the time you get here.
Yeah, by the time you're here, trust me, we'll have this figured out.
We got world peace.
Yeah, we're trying to figure out world peace.
Yeah, so it snowed like crazy here in Cyprus.
Good.
I heard an inch.
Like an inch of snow on the ground. Another half an hour.
We haven't looked outside in the last hour, so we're going to take a short ride on a snowmobile just to check the trail. Did you go out on the trails, yes or no?
No, I did not.
Well, we're going to fire up 2 of the sleds and just take a quick whip around. We figured if we can whip around through Lake Helene, at least, we'll have a good sense.
Yeah. Just smoke back. Hey, is your 4-wheeler gonna be done?
I sent them an email and never heard back from them. So my guess is no. So I sent an email to them and just said, hey, when I was in there, you didn't really know. You got the parts in, but you were going to get back to me. I didn't hear from you. So I'm sending you an email reminder on the timing around picking up my RZR. So at least a couple hours ago, I didn't have anything in my email from it. Let me look here real quick.
Yeah, just send them an email. So I'll be there tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Pick it up.
Good.
That'll get their attention.
Yeah. Well, I've got, now it's just sort of going to get it, and everything has become less of an urgency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've had no snow at all up there today?
No, not as of an hour ago. It was light. I mean, we're talking mini flurry.
Yeah, I just kind of came out of the snow and now I'm in the sun.
Good. Well, that's the problem. It's really isolated, and we need a big band that's just dropping big flakes.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Get the lake effect snow. Maybe they got some up by Namakagon.
Yeah. Well, I've kind of heard that Namakagon's like the outer reach or the outer band for lake effect. That's what my friend tells me anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
Well, good. Your wife wanted to go for a snowmobile ride with us, but I don't know that. I think we got to fly and check out everything before we get everybody on snowmobiles and out there, because my guess is it's going to be really icy.
Yeah, let's just do it quick.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah, well, let me know after you guys get back. We snow report.
All right, we'll do. See you later.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I would say is that our organization has been able to identify motivational patterns in people for 55 years, and that we also have found that some of the best motivational stories or patterns come out of young people's story. Simple things like cleaning a garage, organizing a workbench, starting a neighborhood football, tearing down a chicken coop and involving others in the work and pulling nails and organizing things, building a tree house. A lot of things that young people do give unique and accurate insights into how they're motivated. And that if we are careful and get them talking about the things they've loved to do and done well through those very simple stories and achievements in their life, you can find enduring motivations that will be present throughout their lifetime. And in doing that, once you have that, you can help identify some of the vocational outcomes that would match, or jobs that would match those motivations. And the earlier that we can study a person's life story and achievements, the sooner we can help identify with them the kind of things they would love to do in their work or vocation, even though they may not be thinking about that or worried about it, concerned, or motivated to actually do those things at this time in their life. We can, a parent, teacher, mentor, can find some real clear signs of a person's motivation and begin to describe to them and go through a process of understanding, learning about the possibilities.
So, some parents, probably a lot of them, are going to think like Peter. Yeah, I don't know if I want my kid, to be thinking vocational at this point. I just want him to be a kid. How would motivation be helpful at that age?
Well, kids have opportunity to do a lot of things. Study, sports, clubs, volunteer opportunities, work that's meaningful to them. internships. So knowing what your kid's motivated to do is a part of their learning, exploring, and trying things on. But not doing it from scratch, but literally saying, we know something about your kid, which might be helpful to align them to things they love to do, leisure, play, work.
It's not
study.
just mass experimentation.
Right. Yep. And whether or not the job is to actually identify by 9th grade the 3 to 5 things that a kid vocationally could do and do well and find a lot of joy and meaning in, we can add a lot of value to the parent and the educator, the pastor, and the coach, which would be helpful for them as they sort of work with that child to get the best expression of who they are out of them.
So having this portfolio, anybody that's speaking into this kid's world.
Yeah, coaches have a lot of jobs on the football team. Some of the motivations of that work or play, serious business sports, winning, competing, finding your contribution and role to the team, or realizing a kid will be way better at tennis by themselves than they would be as a defensive block, end. And they're more motivated to do individual, team, group work or whatever it might be.
And just to the kid themselves, I mean, a sense of identity and intentionality. I was built.
Finding
purpose.
Finding things that they do well, enjoy more than other things, and being able to put together a motivational profile or portfolio for that kid, which starts giving them ideas, possibilities, and options that are the best fit for them. They do better in theater. They do better in chess club. They do better in sports. They do better in academics. They do better in certain art. They might do better as a coach on a team, organizing the team, helping organize the events or sports, than they would be the actual performer of the sport. Some of the greatest coaches in the world weren't the best players. That's a whole different level of motivation.
Yeah.
Equipping, inspiring, coaching, mentoring, developing, aligning others isn't the same set of motivations or skills that it might take to be a quarterback.
Yeah, so I mean, it really speaks to the whole complexity, of going back to what Scripture says about us being, ear, eye, a nose.
So if we're talking about people of faith, most people of faith would say that my kid was created for a purpose. And I want that kid to live out his purpose in the world. And probably the greatest expression of that purpose is to contribute to society, community, in a way that's meaningful. And they're fearfully and wonderfully made in a certain way to do a certain work in the world or in the church, which would be the best expression of what the Holy Spirit or God wanted them to do.
So does MCOR believe necessarily in specific purpose, or just, that God has given us certain starting points and now go and act in those, and let's build society from there?
I think the people in SEMA and MCOR would say that, yes, people are God created people for a certain purpose to play a certain role in this world in order to live out that purpose. God wouldn't create, or it doesn't seem to have created everybody to be the same. Otherwise, we'd all be doing the same thing, and a lot of people's needs wouldn't be met. We'd all be hearing, but seeing is another important part, tasting is another important part, hearing, whatever the five senses are, they require variety, uniqueness, and specialty. But yeah, the faith-based orientation to motivation does end in a purpose and a unique contribution. And not only does it say that we get to do that, but we're held accountable to actually doing that. God wants us to use our gifts and talents, motivations, to achieve and accomplish a very important work. And once we figure that out, he wants to get the most out of us to accomplish his work for us and his purpose for us in this world. And those of us who know our motivations and understand how those align to our purpose and passion or calling are going to be ahead of others who don't and can't figure it out. I'd say that a big issue in the church today is to help people understand, what does God want from me? What does he require of me, need from me, expect of me? And it has a lot to do with how he's built me and motivated me. People don't want to just go to the church, they want to be the church. And being the church means they have to do something to contribute to that church, its work, its mission, its vision. Belonging and believing are not the same as changing, impacting, and living out your destiny.
Dying empty.
Yeah. You can't just believe in God. He requires motion, motivation, something for that belief. Belonging to a church or a group gives you some sense of community identity, but it doesn't get the work done of changing the world and impacting the world. Motivation is an outward motion, not an inward reality. Just to learn who you are is not enough. It's to do something with what you know.
Yeah, as Christians, like you said, we have the responsibility.
Stewardship of your life.
Stewardship.
The call and accountability for what you've been given. The parable of the talents is really clear. Some have been given a higher level of calling and responsibility than others, but everybody has been given what they need to play a certain role. And when we know that the widow's mite, the widow in giving, was greater than a rich man turning over his fortune because of her belief and her sacrifice. See, God's economy is different than ours. And a small leader in a small company might contribute in a higher way than Bill Gates in God's way of seeing things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we all get that and understand that and believe that. So we have responsibility to help develop every person to their potential, which is another motivation, is potential.
Well, that was good. Innovators Tribe Northwoods Edition.
Scene 1, version 1, done. Well, there's a little something to play with.
Right.
And you could go back and extract a few things, write down the things that you think are important, refine a little bit that story for the homeschool. I'm more convinced than anything that we ought to try to leverage homeschoolers that have a religious Christian orientation to their work. Not sure how to figure that out. There's associations
I think so.
that are just, well, I know that because I know people who belong to some of them, but I don't know what they are.
Yeah, again, I think they start with a common worldview, so that's huge, right?
Yep.
So I've tapped into the secular homeschool market,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
next week I have a campaign going out just to the secular market. It'd be interesting to separate those out and to see when we do this survey, just to see what type of feedback. If we can somehow, craft these survey questions. What am I going for here? Just to see what type of a response from the secular market would be.
And we can get that.
I'm in total agreement. I think our energy exhaustion would be better spent with that common worldview.
Yeah, as soon as you align people who say, I trust you, you're going to help me, you have a theological orientation to what you're doing that aligns with them, that's going to be a stronger level of commitment that they will have to the product or the process.
Yeah, agreed.
And a higher level of trust.
But there's still mass value that even a secular market could pull out of this.
Huge. Well, that's the big goal. The goal isn't just to help Christians do better, but it's to help everyone do better.
Absolutely. And then when you posture somebody, non-Christians, in a proper worldview, how more receptive are they to Christianity?
Agreed. Good stuff.
Good stuff.